as I love dinosaurs. Welcome to another episode of the Disney with Kels podcast. I'm your host, Kelsey Conkling, and I wanted to thank you guys for sticking with me for these 3 episodes now because I'm still trying to figure out this whole podcast YouTube thing. So thanks for bearing with me as there have been technical difficulties and all different kinds of things. So this week is part 2 of my favorite attraction series. If you missed last week's episode, I talk about my favorite attractions at Magic Kingdom and Epcot. And this week, I'm going to be talking about my favorite attractions at Hollywood Studios and Animal Kingdom. So to start, I'm going to talk about my favorite attractions at Hollywood Studios. And the first one that I have picked is one of my favorites, probably overall, in the Disney parks. Now, it's not my top favorite. That's really hard to pick, but I also wanted to preface this saying that last week I said the same thing, but I'm not going to rank each ride individually within the parks themselves because it was hard enough to pick a top 3 from the parks. So I'm just going to give you my top 3 overall, but I will say that this one is really high near the list, and that is Star Wars Rise of the Resistance. So a little bit of history about Rise of the Resistance. It was announced at the D23 Expo in 2015, along with Star Wars Land as a whole, which is known as Batuu. But they didn't announce the name of the ride until 2018. But in 2015, they kind of gave everybody a teaser of what the ride was going to be. And they described it as that guests would be placed in the middle of a climactic battle between the First Order and the Resistance. And the ride and Star Wars Land as a whole are set between movies 8 and 9 of the Skywalker saga. So between the events of The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. The ride opened in Hollywood Studios in the December of 2019 and at Disneyland in January of 2020. So they opened very close together. And for Rise of the Resistance, it was placed on a virtual queue system. And this was the first time that virtual queue had been unveiled to Disney guests. And when it first started, you had to be scanned into the park by a certain time. And if I remember correctly, I think it was 7 a.m. So me and my mom, we actually went to Disney World, to Hollywood Studios in January of 2020. And we were scanned into the park with a whole bunch of other people trying to get a virtual queue at exactly 7 a.m., but you had to be scanned into the park first. It was a little chaotic, but I remember when we did get it, we got boarding group 30-something, and we were like, well, is that good? I don't know if that's good or not. And everyone around us was either cheering or was really sad because they didn't get one. Anyway, it is no longer on a virtual queue, but you can also buy an individual Lightning Lane, but it is not part of the Lightning Lane multi-pass that they just unveiled. So if you wanted to use the Lightning Lane, you would have to buy an individual ticket, and that is per person. On the busiest days, I've seen it be $20, and on the slower days, I've seen it be $15. So it is still one of the more expensive Lightning Lanes, but that is an option if you would like it to be. So what is Rise of the Resistance? I'm talking all about this. I'm not telling you what it is. In general, it is the most immersive attraction that I have ever experienced. Not just at Disney World, but anywhere. And, Disney World is kind of the bar that we set, right? But the queue is on the Resistance base in Batuu. And there are 3 phases of what I would call pre-shows. And then the ride itself, where you're actually in a ride vehicle. So I like to say that the ride and the attraction and the experience starts when you get to that first pre-show. And the experience starts when you're in the queue and you're seeing all of the Resistance equipment and things like that. But for me, I say, we got to the ride when we got to the first pre-show. And during the pre-shows, you are taken prisoner by the First Order and are taken to interrogation by Kylo Ren because he wants to know the location of the secret Resistance base. And after that, you are just trying to escape. That's your whole goal, is to try to escape the clutches of Kylo Ren. And the ride itself uses a trackless ride system, and it was the first trackless dark ride system at any Disney park in the United States. There has been trackless ride systems in other Disney parks around the world, like Remy and Disneyland Paris. But this was the first one in the United States. And on the ride, you are in like pods of 8 seats, and you're taken through the ride in these pods that move you in a very specific way. That's the whole point of the trackless system. And depending on which pod you are in, there are 2 per like ride group. You get a different ride experience slightly, but it is different depending on like you go left or right. So that's pretty cool, I think. For this ride, there is a 40-inch height requirement. And in terms of accessibility, the Disney website does say that you must transfer from your ECV or wheelchair into the ride vehicle. And the ride seat itself, they're individual seats so they're 4 in a row, but they're individual seats, and everybody has a lap seatbelt. And a trick that I have learned, because seatbelts can sometimes be a little bit difficult for me, if they're a struggle, pull the seatbelt all the way out before you sit down. Once you sit down, then it's much easier to get the seatbelt all the way across you and buckled in properly. So that's just a little tip I like to tell people if seatbelts are a struggle. And going into like why I love it, why do I think Rise of the Resistance is one of the best rides at Disney? Again, it's the most immersive ride that I have ever been on, and I truly feel like I'm in the story whenever I ride this ride. I feel a little bit nervous when you're being interrogated, air quotes, by the First Order. And then like just the variety of the attraction itself. There are so many different elements to the attraction with the pre-shows and the cast members that are playing the roles, and then the ride itself. And speaking of the cast members, there is a fly. Speaking of the cast members, they also help to fully immerse you in the story. So there's both Resistance and First Order cast members, and they play their roles very well. The Resistance cast members are trying to break you out, and the First Order cast members are really trying to intimidate you. So they just do an amazing job. So shout out to those cast members, because that can be a difficult job to stay that in character the whole time. And I think that they do an excellent job. And because of all the pre-shows and all the stuff leading up to the actual ride, which is very important to the ride experience, like I think you need to see every pre-show and know what's going on to get the full effect. The experience itself is pretty long because of that. And so I feel like even though if you waited a really long time in the line, you do get a very lengthy ride experience or just attraction experience itself. And I just wanted to tell the story of the first time that I rode Rise of the Resistance. I am someone who doesn't like to look at spoilers at all for any new rides. And I knew that my mom and I had a trip planned this was January of 2020, so it was going to be brand new. And I'm like, okay, well, if we do get the virtual queue and if we do get to ride it, I'm not going to look at any spoilers or anything like that, because I want to go in with fresh eyes and not expect certain things, okay? So first of all, we went through all 3 pre-shows, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is insane. Like, I love this. I feel like I'm in the story. And then we get on the ride, and we make it about, I would say 2/3 of the way through the actual ride when our vehicles stop. They stop dead in their tracks. And the service lights come on, like the emergency lights come on, and we're told to stay in our vehicles. And I'm like, oh no. So we're sitting there for quite a while, just in the middle of the floor on the Star Destroyer. And we get told that we are going to have to be evacuated off the ride because the ride was too messed up or too broken to be fixed quickly enough that we could stay on the ride. So anyway, we wait our turn, and a cast member comes to get us. And so I get to step out onto the floor of the Star Destroyer, and also my popcorn bucket fell off of my bag, and the lid flew off and flew across the floor. Thankfully, there was no popcorn in it. I would have been mortified. But yeah, so I had to go chase down my popcorn bucket lid while the cast member is staring at me, and everybody is staring at me. But anyway, we got to go backstage a little bit and see things, which that honestly, it was cool. And it was cool to just step out onto the floor of the Star Destroyer, on the actual ride. But part of me wishes that didn't happen because it kind of messed up the momentum and the rhythm for the story. And, we got to see backstage, which always just, for me, ruins the magic just a little bit. Like, it's cool to see for sure and everything like that. But I just wish we wouldn't have broken down. All that to say, so we get out to the exit and they give us a return time for later in the day. Like when it's back up and running, they say, hey, you can go through I don't know if it was Lightning Lane at that point, but it was like you go through the fast pass line. We're like, okay, cool. So it was like later in the afternoon. It finally went back up again. So we went back and went through the fast pass line, the Lightning Lane line, whatever it was called. And then we get all the way through. And again, the pre-shows can be pretty lengthy. We get through all the pre-shows again, and we're about to go into our interrogation rooms, and the ride breaks down again. So we don't even get on the ride vehicle this time. And we are again escorted backstage, and they give us a pass to come back. But at that point, it was getting pretty close to our dinner reservation that was at a different park or a different resort or something like that. And so we were like, oh no, let's see if we can come back tomorrow, because we had annual passes. So we went up to one of the cast members at the entrance of the ride and kind of pleaded our case. We're like, okay, like this is the second time it's broken down on us today, and we have a dinner reservation. Is there any way we can get this fast pass switched to tomorrow? And I remember distinctly this man, he was so kind, but we were kind of like explaining ourselves, me and my mom were, and he was already like pressing buttons to get us a return time for the next day. And when I say return time, I mean just like a pass to come back whenever for the next day. So that was very nice of him. And finally, we came back the next day and got to ride it all the way through with no interruptions. So I just always like to tell that story because I'm like, well, it wasn't a super successful first ride, but it was so much fun, and I honestly wouldn't trade it for anything. Like, we got to ride it 2.5 times, I guess, technically, when other people were just trying to ride it for the first time. So that's kind of cool. But anyway, that's why I like Rise of the Resistance, because it is so immersive and there's just so many different elements to it. And it is so much fun. And the next ride at Hollywood Studios that is one of my favorites is the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror. So some of the history for the Tower of Terror, most people just shorten it to the Tower of Terror. It opened in Hollywood Studios in 1994, and it was based on the TV series The Twilight Zone. And if you don't know what The Twilight Zone is, I would recommend you look up some episodes on YouTube. But basically, it's a TV series where each episode is like a different scenario. So if you've ever seen Black Mirror, it is kind of like that. So it's a little spooky, a little bit creepy. It's full of plot twists. And for me, every episode just gives me a little bit of the heebie-jeebies. But it's not super scary. It's not super creepy. It's just like, oh, that makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable. And in the original promos for the ride, they said that it was based on an alleged lost, air quotes, Twilight Zone episode. I don't know if that was ever confirmed or not, but that's what they say. And, they were trying to promote it, so that makes sense. And the premise of the ride is that guests are visiting the Hollywood Tower Hotel that was abandoned in 1939 after it was struck by lightning, and it sent an elevator plummeting and killing the 5 people that were inside the elevator at the time. And also it caused several wings of the hotel to mysteriously disappear. And since then, it has maintained a reputation of being haunted and mysterious ever since. And now guests are invited to tour the Hollywood Tower Hotel and use a maintenance service elevator to do so. So that being said, it is a free fall ride. You are in the elevator and it falls very quickly. And it's very unique because the ride is completely randomized. So not completely randomized, but the up and down part is randomized. So each time you ride it, the falls are different. So it's not just a one and done lift and then you fall very fast. It's up and down. And so sometimes you'll have 3 big rises and falls, and then other times it's just a lot of little falls, but you never know what's coming, which I think is really cool. So every time you ride it, you don't expect it, what's going to happen. And just a fun fact for you, the Hollywood Tower Hotel is 199 feet tall, and that's because of FAA requirements that every building of 200 feet tall or more have to have a red light on the top. And Imagineers thought it would take away from the theming, and all other Disney World attractions are the same way. Expedition Everest is actually the tallest attraction at Walt Disney World at 199.5 feet. So they just miss having to put a red light up on the top, which, I mean, that's really smart of them to to do that. For the Tower of Terror attraction, there is a 40-inch height requirement. In terms of accessibility, the Disney website says that you must transfer to a wheelchair and then to the ride vehicle itself. And the ride seat itself is individual seat spots within a bench, kind of like Rise of the Resistance, but a little different. And there are very small armrest things, and they're metal, and they're separating each seat, but they're like way down by your hip bones. So if that's something that is a concern for you, always just ask a cast member for help. But for me, like, I've never really had too big of an issue. I can't hold on to the handrails because it's kind of a tight fit. But again, that's just something to consider if that's a struggle for you. And why do I love the Tower of Terror? Well, I just love the feeling of free fall. And I didn't used to like that. I was so terrified of the ride when I was younger, when my parents would take us. So me and my dad hung out outside the ride while my mom and my brother went on the attraction. But now it is one of my favorite rides because of the free fall. And I just love the feeling of like your stomach like flipping upside down. I think it's super fun. And I'm not like typically into super spooky stuff, but this ride I think is a good balance between spooky and fun and just a little silly, because like, okay, well, I'm completely safe, but again, you never know what's going to happen with the falls. So it's always a little bit apprehensive, but it's still very fun. And the last ride that I really enjoy at Hollywood Studios, which I love all of them. Again, I love all of them in their own way. But the last ride I love that I've picked for this at Hollywood Studios is Toy Story Mania. And this was formerly known as Toy Story Midway Mania. The history of it was opened in 2008. And then when Toy Story Land opened in 2018 in Hollywood Studios, the entrance to the ride was changed so that it was in the land. But as far as I know, the ride itself didn't change. They just changed the entrance and the queue and how that all worked. I didn't ride it prior to it being in Toy Story Land, so I can't really speak to that. But when they did move it to be in Toy Story Land, they dropped the Midway from the name of the ride, so now it's just Toy Story Mania. So what is it? Well, it's themed after Toy Story, if that wasn't abundantly clear. And it is a 4D interactive attraction where you are shrunk down to the size of the toy and ride in a spinning vehicle that takes you around to play 5 different Midway games with the Toy Story characters. And you use a little cannon thing that's like affixed in front of each seat to play the games. And if you don't know what Midway is, it's like the carnival, like a fair. You wear 3D glasses during the ride, and you are competing with everyone else in your car to get the highest score. There also are Easter eggs within each game. So if you hit certain targets in a certain way and in a certain time frame, then there are special things that can happen when you and you can get a ton of points. And that's why at the end of the ride, it'll show you on a screen like the highest score of the day. And it's always this crazy amount because all these people know the tips and tricks, and I haven't memorized all of them. It's the same way with Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger Spin for me. I don't know all the secret targets to hit, so I'm never the highest score. I usually am the highest score in the vehicle, but I'm never near what the highest score of the day is on Toy Story Mania. For this ride, there is no height requirement, and it says all ages. And I've seen people baby wear their baby on the ride, but I would also just, if you're wondering, just keep in mind that it can be a little bit jerky, and there is a lap bar. It's not like a super aggressive lap bar or anything like that, but if you're pregnant or if you're worried, like if your baby can't hold their head up super well, I might skip this ride just because it does whip you around a little bit to each of the games. But Disney says it's for all ages and there's no height requirement. So take with that what you will, make your own decisions. So why do I love Toy Story Mania? I'm a skosh competitive, and I like that you're actually getting to play the game and compete with other people. I'm not like overly competitive, I don't think. I do like to win. Don't get me wrong. I know my family and my friends are watching this, so they know I like to win and they know I like to be right. But I just like that you get to compete on this ride, that it's not just a pretend game. So that's why I like it. And I also love Toy Story. I grew up with Toy Story. The first one came out before I was born, just a few years. So anyway, I've grown up with all of those movies. So it's just a little fun thing. Very nostalgic. And now it's time for
Joke of the Week.
Okay, it's now time for another Kelsey's Disney Joke of the Week. I am filming this before my last episode has actually premiered on YouTube, so I hope you guys do enjoy the Joke of the Week. So anyway, you're getting it again, and we'll see if you guys really hate it, and then maybe I'll stop. But let's see. So the joke of the week this week is Star Wars theme, just because I'm talking about Hollywood Studios and how much I love Star Wars Rise of the Resistance. So here it is. What do you call a droid that likes taking the scenic route? What do you call a droid that likes taking the scenic route? I'll let you think. R2 Detour. Okay, I didn't make that one up. I looked up that joke, but it made me laugh. So that was Kelsey's Disney Joke of the Week, and I'm so sorry about that. So now moving on to Animal Kingdom, and I'm already a little sad talking about this. I am filming this on Sunday, August 11th. So last night at the D23 Expo, they announced something very sad in my mind about Animal Kingdom, and so I will just go into it. My favorite ride, and one of my favorite rides in all of Disney World, is Dinosaur. And at the D23 Expo last night, they announced that they are replacing Dinosaur with a new Indiana Jones ride at Animal Kingdom. Now, to be fair, we did know this was coming a little bit, but nothing was confirmed. They had kind of just hinted at something happening to Dinosaur. They didn't say Indiana Jones. They sort of hinted at Zootopia something a few years ago when they announced that, but we didn't really know. Now we do, and I am just a little bit sad about that because Dinosaur is one of my favorite rides. But anyway, just to give you a little bit of history about Dinosaur. It was an opening day attraction at Animal Kingdom in 1998, and it was originally known as Countdown to Extinction. So it still had the dinosaur theme, but in 2000, it was renamed to Dinosaur and rethemed a little bit. I mean, it was rethemed to promote the new Disney animated film at the time known as Dinosaur. But the ride and the movie don't really align with their stories, other than the fact that there is an iguanodon, which is the type of dinosaur that is the main character of the movie Dinosaur. But regardless, it was rethemed to promote that movie. But I guess it didn't work very well because honestly, it's not a huge like classic Disney film. I watched it once, which is crazy for me. But I guess I should watch it again. It's on Disney Plus if you want to watch it. But anyway, the premise is that you are helping Dr. Seeker to go back in time to the Cretaceous period to bring back an iguanodon before the giant asteroid destroys you and all life as they knew it. So it's a little bit hectic, I might add. But what is it? It uses the same ride technology as Indiana Jones in Disneyland, which I think is why that they're bringing it to Animal Kingdom, because it uses the same ride vehicle. But in Dinosaur, the vehicles are called time rovers, so they're a time machine, and they take you on quite the exciting journey to go get the iguanodon. But basically, they're just these big trucks that seat 12 people in 3 rows of 4. And along the way, you see a lot of different species of dinosaurs, and only a couple of them want to eat you, which is nice. For this ride, there is a height requirement of 40 inches. And for accessibility, the Disney website says that you must transfer from your wheelchair or ECV into the ride vehicle. And personally, from my experience, if you have a bad back or neck or really any issue, or if you have a hard time like keeping yourself upright, I would not ride the ride. It is very jerky. There's lots of sudden movements, and it is very difficult to kind of keep yourself righted. And then the seats themselves, each seat is its own seat, and there are handlebars that come up a little bit higher than some of the other attractions, and then each seat has an individual seatbelt. So again, you can do that seatbelt trick, pull it all the way out, sit down, and then put it across. And there's a little pouch in front of you that holds your stuff. But again, why do I love it? Why do I love Dinosaur so much, and why am I so broken up about this? I'm excited for all the new things that they've announced, but Dinosaur has just been one of my really favorite rides that I always rope drop and everything like that. So anyway, the reason I like it is because I love dinosaurs. I just really like dinosaurs. I think they're fun to learn about. I think it's fun because it's sort of like fantasy, but they were real. But there's so many stories where it turns into like sci-fi fantasy. So I just love dinosaurs, and I love the ride system itself. So that's why I'm excited that they're putting Indiana Jones there, and they're keeping the ride vehicles, hopefully, so that it's the same sort of ride experience, because I really do like all the jerking motions and the back and forth and things like that. They're just really thrilling to me. And again, they haven't set a date for when Dinosaur is closing or when Indiana Jones is opening yet as of the recording of this video, which again is Sunday, August 11th. But yeah, y'all, I'm just really obsessed with this ride. I have a sticker on my old laptop that says we're not going to make it. I have a poster, and you might see it in some of my TikToks. I'll put a picture here. But it's the ride poster for Dinosaur. And then my mouse pad at work is the Dino Institute. So I am really going to miss the ride. But I'm excited to see what the Imagineers are going to do, because they said it's going to be like a new Indiana Jones ride, not like a carbon copy of the one in California. So I'm excited to see that. And then I am going to ride the California version of Indiana Jones when I go there in March. So that'll be fun. Okay, so let's move on from talking about how sad I am that Dinosaur's leaving and go on to the next ride at Animal Kingdom that I really enjoy. And that is Avatar Flight of Passage. Avatar Flight of Passage opened in 2017 along with the World of Pandora, which a lot of people call it Avatar Land, but it is the land from the movie franchise Avatar, and the one with the blue people, the Na'vi, not the Last Airbender. I talked to somebody one time, they're like, well, I saw there was Avatar Land and I really thought it was Avatar the Last Airbender. And I was like, you did? Oh, that must have been disappointing for you then. But Flight of Passage is described as a 3D augmented reality flying simulator attraction, and it allows guests to feel like they're riding on the back of a banshee as you fly through Pandora, through the world of Avatar. You wear 3D glasses and you sit in a seat facing like a large dome-like screen, so kind of reminiscent of Soarin'. It's this huge screen, but you're all in these individual seats, kind of on a ledge, overlooking the screen and looking, it's everywhere. The screen's everywhere. You feel very immersed in it. But there are leg and back restraints, and the height requirement for Flight of Passage is 44 inches. And in terms of accessibility, the Disney website says that you must transfer to a manual wheelchair and then to the ride seat itself. And because of the type of seat that it is, you may have a harder time if you have larger legs or a larger stomach. And just note that I've not had a super big issue with this ride. I do feel like I have to suck in my gut a little bit, but I've never had an issue locking in. It is a little bit uncomfortable for me, but again, totally worth the ride. So if you think you might have a struggle with that, just ask a cast member for help, and they could tell you more about that. So why do I love this ride? Well, again, it's very immersive. You can feel the banshee like breathing on your legs, because it's like you're riding on the back of the banshee, so you're straddling it like a horse. And the way that the ride seat is you can feel their breathing. It's really neat. It smells wonderful. So again, all that immersion. So you're seeing things, you're feeling things, you're hearing things, and you're smelling things. The only thing you don't is you don't taste anything. But if they added that in, man, it would be fully immersive. And the music is just so inspiring. I really enjoy the Avatar movies, and they just announced too that there is going to be another Avatar movie, and again, very, very exciting. So yeah, I typically don't seek out to ride it in Animal Kingdom anymore though, just because it is a very long wait time and I don't want to buy Lightning Lane most of the time. So I haven't ridden it in a while. I usually just go ride Dinosaur, Expedition Everest, and then the Safari, and then I'm done at Animal Kingdom for the day if I go on the trails or something. But if I do get the chance to skip the line, then I definitely will to ride Flight of Passage. And the last ride at Animal Kingdom, so my last of my favorites for this 2-part series, is Expedition Everest, Legend of the Forbidden Mountain. So Expedition Everest opened in 2006, and the Imagineers, most notably Joe Rohde, he basically built Animal Kingdom from the ground up. They actually took several trips to the Himalayas for their research for the attraction, so it looks pretty authentic for like a roller coaster, I think. And it is, of course, based on the legend of the Yeti in the Himalayan mountains. And it is a roller coaster, if I didn't say that before, where you board an expedition train to take a leisurely ride through the Himalayan mountains and then end up doing all you can to escape from the Yeti that finds you. And the ride features a giant animatronic Yeti that originally like moved and kind of swiped at the train as it passed underneath them. However, after only a year of it being in operation, since it's so large and its strength was just putting too much strain on the mountain, they had to put the Yeti in what they call B mode, which otherwise known to a lot of us Disney park goers as Disco Yeti, because the Yeti doesn't move anymore, but they use wind machines and strobe lights to kind of give the illusion that it's moving as you're moving underneath it on the train. So we call it Disco Yeti just because of the strobe lights, but it is still pretty menacing when you ride underneath it. But yeah, so why do I love Expedition Everest? Well, if you watched last week's video, you know that I am a sucker for a good roller coaster, and Expedition Everest is one of the best roller coasters. It's, classic roller coaster train, but there are a lot of different elements and ways that you move along. There's like track switches, and you're in the darkness and then you're outside, and there's different lighting effects that make it seem like you are kind of in danger a little bit. So I always love the little bit of suspense. And you get a really cool view of not only Animal Kingdom, but also Disney World. So when you're going up the very first lift hill, or really the only lift hill, you can see so far, just because the land is so flat in Florida. There's also a single rider line. Hey, I love single rider lines because oftentimes I'm there by myself. And I once rode it 5 times in a row utilizing the single rider line. And it was like first thing. If it was, this wasn't first thing in the morning, but if it is first thing in the morning, they usually don't have the single rider line open because it's just a walk on, because people are usually rope dropping the Safari or Flight of Passage. So that's just something to keep in mind. Not a ton of people go to Expedition Everest for rope drop. And the last time I rode it was my last trip, and I had tried to rope drop Dinosaur, but it was down at the moment. So I went over to Everest, and I think I rode that 2 or 3 times in a row. So super fun. So that was all of my favorite attractions for Hollywood Studios and Animal Kingdom. Thank you so much for listening. Next week, I will dive into all of the announcements they made at the D23 Expo, because there are a lot of announcements that they made. A lot of really fun things coming to Disney Plus, coming to theaters. They're making TV shows. Disney Cruise Line announced some things, and the Disney Parks announced a whole lot. So I'm going to be diving into that for next week's episode. So thank you guys so much for listening. This was the end of my favorite attractions series, but who knows? When all these new attractions open, I might have to do a follow-up. If you liked this video, please give it a like, and subscribe to my channel if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on a podcast app, I would really appreciate it if you liked the episode, followed me, and gave me a 5-star rating, or whatever rating is honest to you. If there is a topic that you want to hear me yap about, then please leave a comment down below, and I will read all of them and see what I can do. Thank you guys so much for listening again. I'm Kelsey Conkling. This was the Disney with Kels podcast, and I hope you guys have a great, big, beautiful tomorrow.